Good afternoon, everybody. My name is TG4041, and currently we are under a breaking news. Currently, Trump is doing. I'm sorry. Currently, Trump is doing a live conference about the coronavirus case. So let's just get it started because I need content, and this is news. And it's not even fake news, first of all. So don't even get started with that.
Something like $50 billion for the airlines, $150 billion in loan guarantees for critical sectors of the economy, a $250 billion payment on April 6th directly to individuals, another $250 billion payment on May 18th, again, directly to individuals, and as well, $300 billion for small business loan guarantees. Is that, in the general sense, what you're looking at?
It could be, and we're also playing with a lot of numbers, a lot of very big numbers, and a lot of very small numbers, frankly. We want to take care. We have to help everybody. It was nobody's fault. This happened. I mean, some people could say it was somebody's fault, actually. But it was nobody's fault, and certainly none of these companies that all of a sudden had no passengers in planes and had no passengers on cruise ships and all of the things that have happened. But I will say that they can't be blamed for this, and we want to keep those companies vibrant because there's going to be a comeback very, very quickly as soon as this is solved, and it will be solved. We will win, and there will be a comeback, and it'll take place very quickly.
$250 billion, there's give or take 330 million Americans or so. If you just do the math on that, that's about $750 a person, a family of four. That would be about $3,000 on average. Again, rough math. Is that where this is headed?
Well, no, I don't want to say that because it's a moving. These are all every number that you mentioned. Yes, we've talked about those numbers. We're also moving those numbers in both directions. So we'll let you know. It's moving along fast. Again, there's a great bipartisan effort going on that I haven't really seen before to this extent.
Mr. President, on On the self-swab that you mentioned at the beginning of this, has the FDA approved that test?
No, they're looking at it. It's down the line, and they're looking at it very seriously. And I think it would be a great thing because the others, to use a nice word, it's very inconvenient. It's very tough.
For you, sir. You tweeted this morning about your approval rating amongst Republicans. You have said that you give yourself a 10 in terms of handling this crisis. How do you reassure Americans at home who don't trust you to handle a crisis of this magnitude?
Well, I think we're doing a really good job. We started off with a termination of the border, the people coming in from China, where this all started. That meant I took it very seriously. And when I use the word calm doesn't mean that I'm not taking it seriously. Calm means, and we should be calm. We should be extremely calm. But, yeah, 95% within the Republican Party and over 50%. And I also have, we have very great approval numbers. I mean, people like the job that we're doing. And when you compare this to other epidemics, or if you want to use a different term, you can, but within this country, and you look at what's happened over the years, this is being handled very, very professionally. We have the greatest professionals in the world. We're doing a good job. Nobody's ever been swamped like this. And nothing's been so contagious. The level of contagion has been incredible, actually. Nobody's seen anything quite like this. Yeah, Peter, go ahead.
If I can ask you about the tests, sir, for a second. Yeah. If federal officials have shipped millions of tests, as you and your colleagues have said, why, as the federal government says, have only 59,000 tests been processed to this point? We just heard from the Atlanta public health director saying that they have fewer than 50 test kits for more than 900,000 citizens.
Yeah,
Where are the tests?
I'll let Mike answer that. Deborah.
So that's a very critical question, and thank you for asking it. So the test kits that we put out last week through the approval, the rapid movement of that meeting that President Trump called less than 2 weeks ago, that has resulted in bringing our private sector to the table, because the tests in the platform that was out there could only run between 4 and 12 tests per platform per day. We've now moved into platforms that can run basically tens of thousands of tests per day. So the reason I'm grateful for your question, because it allows me to point out that, of course, then there was backlog. There were individuals who had been tested, who hadn't had their specimen run because of the slow throughput. It's now in a high-speed platform. So we will see the number of people diagnosed dramatically increase over the next 4 to 5 days. I know some of you will use that to raise an alarm that we are worse than Italy because of our slope of our curve. To every American out there, it will be 5 to 6 days worth of tests being run in 24 to 48 hours. So our curves will not be stable until sometime next week. The reason I talked about Thermo Fisher yesterday is because their platform is in 2,000 laboratories. They're the ones that are putting out the 1 million tests this week that will solve the issue that Atlanta and others have brought up. I wanted to be clear. We prioritize the areas. We do county by county analyses. Based on those analyses, on what counties had more than 50 cases, we prioritize the test kits we put out, the 400,000. And that's why we're seeing a 7% plus positivity rate. We'll be able to expand that platform and reprioritize based on the accessibility of the other kits.
Mr. President, perhaps I can follow up. How are non-symptomatic professional athletes getting tests while others are waiting in line and can't get them? Do the well-connected go to the front of the line?
Well, you'd have to ask them that question. I mean, I've read. No, I wouldn't say so, but perhaps that's been the story of life. That does happen on occasion, and I've noticed where some people have been tested fairly quickly. Look, we inherited a very.
Encourage them to defer their tests to others.
Excuse me. We inherited a very obsolete system. This was a system that was out of date, obsolete, or it was a system that was never meant to take care of the kind of quantity, the number of people that we're talking about, millions and millions of people. If you go back in years past, like even recently with the flu, nobody had tests before. They didn't test the entire nation to see whether or not they had flu. They got the flu, they got better. Hopefully they got better, that was it. Now, all of a sudden, they do this very complex testing. What we've done is we've broken it down, we've broken up the system, but it was obsolete, and/or you could say it was also a system that just wasn't meant to handle the kind of volume that you're talking about. We've rebuilt it into a system that for the future will be a very good system if you want to go this route. But this was never done before, and I would imagine it will be done in the future, but we built it into a very good system by using private companies, the great private companies. And I have to say Roche has been doing a very good job. They're doing a lot of work, a very good job. But this was an obsolete system. This was not a system that was meant to do anything like this or even near this. John?
Mr. President, a couple of things. A major trade coalition is calling on you to suspend tariffs with other countries as part of the response to the coronavirus.
Who heads that group? Those countries do, probably.
No, it's an
Go
American.
check.
It's an American free trade.
I know. I'm sure of free trade. Look, China's paying us billions and billions of dollars in tariffs, and there's no reason to do that. They haven't even spoken to me about that. China hasn't asked me to do that, but we're getting billions of dollars a year from tariffs from China, and I can't imagine Americans asking for that, but it could be that China will ask for a suspension or something. Let's see what happens. China's having a very rough time. They have their worst year in 76 years, as I understand it. They're having a very, very tough time, and then on top of it, this happened with the virus. But no, we're taking in billions of dollars a year in tariffs, and this was caused by something totally unrelated to tariffs.
And on asylum seekers and people who cross the southern border illegally, are you planning to invoke 42 U.S.C. 265, which would allow you to prohibit entry of certain people
The
across
answer is
the border?
yes.
And when will that happen?
Very soon, probably today. Yes.
President, a question for you and then a question for Dr. Burke.
Yeah.
On the border, firstly, are there plans to fully shut the Mexican border? And what do you define as essential travel when it comes to the U.S.-Canadian border?
Well, I think essential is medical. We have military working together. We have industry working together. And again, it's not affecting trade. So things like that. But just leisurely, let's go to a restaurant and have dinner, which a lot of people do. They come both ways. They go in both directions. That kind of thing we have ended on a temporary basis. Yeah, please go ahead. Not close it. No, we're not going to close it. But we are invoking a certain provision that will allow us great latitude as to what we do.
May I ask
Please.
Dr. Burke
Questions, if I could.
Yeah,
The
go
Wall
ahead.
Street
You know what? Go
Journal
ahead. Sure.
The Wall Street Journal.
Doctor?
So I just wanted to clarify something, because just a week ago, you all were standing here telling us that unless you had sustained contact with somebody who was symptomatic for COVID-19, you really didn't need to worry. You told the president, the vice president, that if they shook hands with somebody who had this, if they took a photograph with somebody who had this, they didn't really need to worry. And yet, several days later, we're in a situation where people are being told, don't leave your houses. There are curfews saying you cannot walk alone at night after a certain time. Can you walk us through what seems like a very dramatic swing, a very dramatic disconnect from what we were hearing before to what we're hearing now?
So two things. We look at data all the time, and I know you're looking at the China and South Korea data. And when you look at China and South Korea data and you look what China and South Korea did, you can see that their curves are not only blunted outside of Wuhan, so the Chinese areas outside of Wuhan, blunted curve, and South Korea, blunted curve. If you look at their curve today, they're already on the far end of their epidemic curve. Of course, none of those countries are fully back to work, and so that's what we worry about too. Secondly, there was a series of scientific articles published, and I know you've seen them too, about surface contamination. I think none of us really understood the level of surface piece. So we're still working out how much is it by human-human transmission and how much is it by surface. And this is why those fundamental guidelines were put out that says don't expose yourself to surfaces outside the home. Basically what those guidelines are is don't expose yourself to excess number of persons who could be asymptomatic and infected, and then the person-to-person contact, and don't expose yourself to surfaces that could have had the virus on it, for which on hard surfaces, I know we had the cardboard issue about shipping, hard surfaces, not shown in fabric as much or in cardboard, but hard surface transmission. These are issues that we haven't had to deal with before with the level of respiratory infections, and that's why we have this concern, and that's why the president put out the guidelines. And so it's to cover both of those pieces. That's all new science, all new models. I think many of you have the Imperial study available and looked at the impact of those. That's the first time those have been modeled as a comprehensive approach to mitigating an epidemic.
And Dr. Burks, yesterday.
Mr. President, what about money?
Go ahead.
Mr. President, the Wall Street Journal is reporting that the administration has looked at an executive order that would expand the use of investigational drugs against the virus, but that FDA scientists are warning that this could put patients at risk.
I haven't
Is this
seen the
something you're
article.
looking at?
No, I haven't seen the article. We are making a lot of progress therapeutically. I will say that, but I have not seen that article, no. Go ahead.
Mr. President, we've shut down non-essential travel to Canada. Are you considering shutting down all travel to blunt the spread of the virus? And we've heard from industries like the airlines who are seeking relief. What other industries or how exactly is your administration going to determine which industries and businesses get
Well, there are
help?
certain industries that people know. I mean, the airlines would be number one if you look at what's going on. They go from having the best year they've ever had to having no passengers because of what we've had to do in order to win this war. It's a war. And so, basically, what many of the industries are. What we want to do is we want to make sure they all stay together so that after the war is won, we can immediately go right back up to where we were and even beyond. I think we're going to go beyond where we were. And a lot of people are saying that, by the way. We're poised to do that. But we have to win the war first. Yeah, please, go ahead.
To follow up on that, Treasury proposed $150 billion today for those industries, but their proposal doesn't detail which industries would get that money and how much. So aside from the airlines, which you just mentioned, what about the cruise industry, the hotels? Yeah. How much of that money do you see them each
We're
getting?
talking about all of it. Haven't detailed it yet. We have detailed it to senators and to members of the House. We have been talking about it, and we're coming up with numbers. Haven't gotten there yet, but certainly hotel industry, the cruise ship industry, the airlines, those are all prime candidates, absolutely.
On the northern border, sir, when you say
Which border?
the northern border,
Yeah.
when you say temporary, which is what you said in your tweet, does that mean 30 days?
I would say 30 days, and hopefully at the end of 30 days, we'll be in great shape. Jeff, please.
Mr. President, I was struck by what Dr. Burke said about millennials and others perhaps not taking some of these warnings as seriously as you would like. Some of those people also seem to be your supporters and conservatives who may be quoting some of what you said at the beginning of this, comparing it to the flu. What is your message to them to really follow what you've been saying so far? And are you concerned that they're still listening maybe to some of your earlier comments rather than your more recent ones?
Well, I think my earlier comments are to be calm. I mean, I do want people to be calm because we're going to win this and we're going to win it. It's just a question of time. And I wanted to go quickly. So based on the fact that I wanted to go quickly, I hope they just listen to what we've been saying over the last period of time. We don't want them gathering, and I see they do gather, including on beaches and including in restaurants, young people. They don't realize that they're feeling invincible. I don't know if you felt invincible when you were very young, but they were feeling totally invincible or are feeling that way, but they don't realize that they can be carrying lots of bad things home to grandmother and grandfather and even their parents. So we want them to heed the advice. We mean the advice, and I think it's getting through. I do believe it's getting through, Jim.
If they're watching,
Please.
what do you say to them if they're watching? Sorry.
If they're what?
I think there are a lot of them watching, a lot of these people at home, these young people.
Well, I think I just said it.
I was going to say, what do you
Heed
say to
the
them?
advice. Heed the advice. I just said, yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Peter.
Mr. President, how long do you think
Thank
this
you,
is going to
Mr.
last?
President.
Mr. President, how long do you think this is going to
We'll
last?
get you next, okay? You know, if you look, I'm 95% of the Republican Party. We just had a poll that was done by a very reputable group where I'm beating Sleepy Joe Biden by a lot in Florida, in the state of Florida, and in other states. You know, so I don't really know who you're talking about. All right, Jennifer, go ahead, please.
Yeah, 2 questions if you're willing, sir. Would you give us an update on your conversation with the airline executives?
Yeah.
Did you explain to them what's coming? What was their reaction?
I did, and they explained to me where they're coming from. I mean, they went from, as I said, full planes, packed, the best year they've ever had by far, to boom, one day empty because of what we have to do to get rid of, to win this war. Or we would have a level of death like people haven't seen before. So they've been fantastic. I mean, they've been great. But, you know, they went from being extremely happy to being people that are running companies that are going to need some help. And we'll help them, Jennifer.
On SBA loans, would you be willing to give us an update on how that's going? We've been getting some reports that counties have been having difficulty getting
Well, it's going. I mean, there's a lot of influx to those loans, as you can imagine. A lot of people are looking at it, but we're going to be increasing funding a lot. They're very well prepared to do what they have to do, and the SBA is doing a fantastic job. She is doing a really good job, the administrator. John?
Mr. President, a couple of questions for Dr. Birx,
Yeah.
if I could. Dr. Birx, French researchers have had hydroxychloroquine in shortening the duration of disease. Is that something that might be in the arsenal of therapeutics here in the United States?
I think we're exploring every one of those issues. The president asked for a critical briefing on that today. He opened with that. It is more than that single drug. There are other drugs that individuals are looking at. Just to go back to what we've talked about many times, there is things that look really good in cell culture against the virus that may look good in small animals and then don't have an impact in humans. And so those are the pieces that we're looking at very carefully. Of course, there's always anecdotal reports, and we're trying to figure out how many anecdotal reports equal real scientific breakthroughs.
And second question, are you confident of the seasonality of coronavirus?
All we can do is look at the past to inform the future. We know what SARS looked like. We also know, and I just want to put this out, I know you can get it online, look at the curve in China and look at the curve in South Korea. Those curves were accomplished in still the winter season. And so we're trying to understand what those relationships are. We're very interested in the curves in Italy because of their different approach, and we're following every single country's curves. And so all we can do is look at prior coronavirus and prior respiratory infection RNA viruses. These are RNA viruses. When you look at flu in the northern hemisphere, when you look at parainfluenza and some of the other cold viruses, and if you look at SARS, that's the way the peak normally occurs. But that is a November to April. We all started later. And so you're asking me to predict based on a later start, and that's what we're trying to really look at China and South Korea to really inform that.
All right, Caitlin, go ahead.
A question for Secretary Wilkie, if you don't mind, or you can answer if you'd like. How many veterans of those that need to be tested have been tested?
Those that have needed to be tested, we believe we've caught most of them. Right now, we have 44 veterans who have tested positive. Sadly, one has passed in Portland. We are working with state labs and private companies to make sure that testing is available. Because the president had us out aggressively early, we have been in a better place than most healthcare systems in the country. I cannot predict, as Dr. Birx said, when the next surge will be, if it will be. But one of the things that we do at VA is that we prepare for national emergencies, be they national disasters or epidemics. We started preparing for this. We started stockpiling equipment. Our equipment is stable, and I think that's in large part because of the instructions the president gave me.
But do you have a number of how many have been tested out of the number that
We've
needs to be
tested several hundred. I can't give you the direct.
The other day.
Yeah, we've tested several hundred. Yes, we've tested several hundred. I don't know exactly. I do know that 44 veterans have the virus. Most of those are quarantined at home.
Go ahead in the back, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. The question for Dr. Birx, quickly. I'm trying to understand it's about the mortality rate. Yesterday, we underlined the fact that we had reached 100 deaths. And this morning, we wake up and we're at 110. Within 12 hours, we climbed by 10%. Is it something we have to expect from now on, a 10% increase every 12 hours?
So very early on in each one of these cases, if you look at all of the countries to date, the mortality is higher at the beginning because you're diagnosing the sickest, the ones who came in quite ill. And I just want to remind the American public that still the majority, the risk for serious illness in the majority of Americans are low. But that doesn't mean that you can't transmit it to one of those higher risk groups. And that's why we're asking for all Americans to take responsibility. You're seeing mortality or deaths today from infections that occurred 2 to 3 weeks ago in general. The other thing that you're seeing is the dramatic and very difficult impact.
This is Mvdnftv Newsline. If you guys just recently joined, we are currently live streaming the White House briefing about the coronavirus going on. Again, this is TG4311 speaking to you, everybody. Today we're going to be talking about... My apologies. We're going to be talking about how the White House is currently briefing about the coronavirus. Once again, they're going to be talking about the coronavirus from the White House briefing.
Mr. President, there's reporting that the federal government has a plan that shows that this coronavirus outbreak might last as long as 18 months. Are you seeing those numbers? Could it
No, we're not seeing
last?
that at all.
And then my second question is, there are at least one White House official who used the term Kung Flu, referring to the fact that this virus started in China. Is that acceptable? Is it wrong? Are you worried that having this virus be talked about as a Chinese virus, that might help?
I wonder who said that. You know who said that?
I'm not sure the person's name, but would you condemn the fact
say
that
the term
Kung
again.
Flu, a person at the White House used the term
Just the
Kung
term.
Flu. My question is, do
Kung
you think
flu.
that's wrong, Kung Flu? And do you think using the term Chinese virus, that puts Asian Americans at risk, that people might target them?
No, not at all. I think they probably would agree with it 100%. It comes from China. There's nothing not to agree. Okay, how about last question? Please go ahead.
Switching gears very quickly.
Say it.
Switching gears to a larger question here. We've seen that before the pandemic, there were a lot of Americans that were already alienated. We saw deaths of despair increasing through suicide and other things. Now, as these individuals, a lot of times in rural parts of the country, are self-isolating, what is your message to those individuals, and what do you hope that individuals, communities, and churches will do to reach out to
My
them?
message is to all Americans, but to those Americans who are going through a lot, we love them, we're with them, and we will not let them down. Thank you all very much.
President Trump concluding another news conference, another briefing on where this country stands right now in its response to the coronavirus. A number of headlines there. The Defense Production Act now has been enacted, and that is going to free up a lot of material. 2,000 operating ventilators from the Department of Defense, as well as field hospitals, will go in. We're hearing also reports of more testing, even though there's plenty of anecdotal evidence that people are still having trouble getting tested. The president said people without symptoms should not be tested. Also, news that the two military hospital ships, massive floating hospitals, if you will be pressed into action at some point. One will be ultimately make its way to the New York area. The other, not clear yet. It's based in San Diego. The president, I think, made a reference to a West Coast destination for that. That in anticipation of a larger need as this goes on. We also heard Deborah Birx, who's coordinating the White House response, who noted that we are going to see that curve, the number of infections climb very rapidly. She did point out that is going to be largely because we're going to be seeing more testing, and thus more people will be popping up on the radar. Let me bring in our chief medical correspondent, Dr. John Torres, right now.
This has been live transmitted from the NBC News, and all jokes aside, I hope I don't get a copyright strike or anything. because I just hope that never happens. So talking about all this entire coronavirus thing, what caught me the most attention is about how one of the White House people wanted to make a joke about it and make it Kung Flu. And to be honest, I'm not sure if this is gonna be sounding biased or not, but it's just completely unacceptable. It's just mostly unacceptable from one of the White House people. Never acceptable for somebody to do that. Just never. It is currently 1:06 in the afternoon. This is TG4041 here with the news. And just explain to you guys, this is the most biased thing I've ever heard. So, my apologies if I suddenly interrupted pretty much anything for you guys' views and stuff. But welcome to YouTube. Anyways, this has been a live transmission from my studios. Thank you for watching. Have a great day.